demonstrates that culture, tradition, and lifestyle choices are strongly linked with climate change mitigation and adaptation. So it is to do with the lifestyle, the trends that we follow, our culture, our traditions, where even Earth, Mother, we address Earth as Mother Earth. So the little choices that we make in our everyday life, the mode of travel that we use, the home appliances that we use, the lifespan of it, the reuse, the recycling habits that we have inculcated since long, our dietary habits, everything, all this counts, all this is linked somewhere to the resilience that we are talking of today. Go to the first slide. Nikita, change the slide.
Yes, ma'am, 1 second.
Keep moving the slide as I talk.
Yes.
Yeah. So when I was talking to our Indian traditions and all, I am reminded of, what our Honorable Prime Minister has said. Climate change is a pressing global challenge. It calls for a collective human action and a comprehensive response. In India, faith and nature have had a deep link since ancient times. So as I was mentioning, it is deeply rooted in our tradition. Next. Next slide. Keep moving, Nikita. The slides, yeah. Now, when we talk of the climate change, now it is not a one-day disaster or a one-day problem which has come up. It is the effects are seen over a long period of time. So when we talk of climate change, it refers to the long-term shifts in temperature and the weather patterns. And these could be either natural or human-made induced factors, which all contributes to the climate change. And it has always happened, but it is only in the 1800s and in India, particularly in the 1900s, that we have realized. And over a period of time, because the ill effects of it has been so bad, that it is time that if we don't wake up now, then the future generations will have nothing, the disaster would have gone beyond repair. So that is why efforts are being made at all levels to bring about a resilient society. Next slide. Now, talking of the hazards or the man-made disaster repercussions of all these disasters that we are experiencing today are urban flooding, heat waves, cyclones, droughts and water scarcity, landslides, rising sea level and storm surges. You can see this image of how in Vietnam, which has been listed by the World Bank as one of the 5 countries which is hardest hit by the climate change. And here you can see how the climate change results in frequent flooding, especially in very poor areas of Vietnam. The fields have had all this has had the effect is seen on the financial loss of the poor people, and many people are still struggling, after all these, they have to struggle to pay for the repairs of their homes. The streets get badly choked, badly affected. All this leads to, the later diseases which comes after it. And all this has finally affected the entire livelihood of Vietnam. So we see frequent floodings in some place. Then you can see the next case of Odisha, where, Odisha and in fact cyclones are almost synonymous. Because of, again, global warming being the reason over here. And Odisha of late has now come under the category 4 cyclone, which is, approximately 99 to 130 mph. So here you can also see effects, the depression in Bay of Bengal, which is a very frequent thing here. So the effects of cyclone is seen in Odisha. Then you have Miami sinking. The western parts of Miami was built on reclaimed wetlands, wherein you can see almost 5 to 6 feet of rise of sea level. And this is also, you can see how 8 lakh population, almost residents, were affected by this. and there was a big problem of, the city was almost, the city became habitable. It was not good enough for people to live here. So these are all the repercussions which we see of global warming. So here also there is a world map. You can see how the carbon emissions are maximum in few countries, and in few countries it is comparatively less. So these carbon emissions are calculated owing to the per capita with respect to the population, and you can see how countries, which produce more oil are the worst in terms of emitting more carbon emissions. You can have the Qatar, you have UAE, you have Saudi Arabia, which are having more of carbon emissions. And of course, you have the countries which have the highest is in terms of the US, the Australia, and Canada. Again, have the highest emissions. A few parts of Europe also. So comparatively, India, emits less compared in a global context. Then next slide, it talks of a comparison is made of different countries with respect to the global, rating. So compared to the overall global rating, which countries are, the blue color indicates which are below the global rating and level, and the above, the red color is above the global equity. So in the first and the second one is more zoom. If you zoom the map, you can see how the Western countries are the worst, and some of the so-called developed countries have a maximum carbon emissions per capita compared to the developing and the poor countries. So it is very easy to say, that you should not have more developments because you will emit more carbon, and the developed countries, in fact, emit the most, the maximum emission of carbon is from those countries. So keeping all this in mind, there has been an effort by the UN to develop goals towards sustainability, which every country has to follow. So there is a commitment made by the governments of various countries which come forward and come to a common uniform strategy which they have to follow. So go to the next slide. Here we are talking how these aspects, the 17 goals that the UN talks of towards sustainability, these are to be practiced at all levels, at the urban level, rural level, from the macro to the micro level. Each of this becomes very important. The first one you can see, which is talking of no poverty. Now, no poverty is which aims, at social protection for the poor. That is, if the poor need to have at least basic access to basic services, and which should be supported by, climate-related extreme effects. If they are the most vulnerable. So unless you cater to or you think of the most vulnerable, you cannot really achieve anything. So the no poverty is, which stands first in terms of social protection for the poor. The second one is zero hunger. Zero hunger, which talks of to end hunger, that is to achieve food security and improved nutrition, and promote all measures of sustainable agriculture, which is, I was talking in the initial first slide also, our ancient traditional methods were all following the sustainable practices, whether it is agriculture or any other cooking in the kitchen, right from the kitchen to the agriculture, everything was all sustainable. Today, we have replaced it with all chemicals, and we have replaced it with all science and technology to get more production, but somewhere we have compromised on the sustainable measures. Then you have good health and well-being. Now this ensures that healthy lives of people, which promotes well-being for all ages, is very essential for sustainable development. We have seen recently, after the COVID-19, how the health of individuals was affected. And all this was because of low immunity and so on. So COVID-19, post-COVID-19, the pandemic effects, which are still being seen in people, especially, the young crowd, anxiety, depression, all this. So there is an effort to make people aware towards health-related issues and to make, healthy living, which is a prerequisite, which is very, very important. Then you have quality education. Now, education, it is believed, it liberates the intellect and it is the most important key to prosperity. It opens up opportunities, and you will have people who can contribute in a better way to a progressive, healthy society. They should, education should be actually freely available. Everybody has to be accessible to it, especially the poor people, free. And in fact, you can see even in our country, efforts are being made at all the local government level to provide free primary and secondary education. So all this should be stressed on more. Vocational education should also be given importance. So finally, skill development, which leads to financial success and safe, secured schools, providing scholarships, such kind of measures have to be taken to provide quality education, where the education has to also be sustainable. That is, towards the end, you develop skills in children in today's generation so that they can provide self-employment and they do not depend on others for making their living. So this should also be one of the goals. Then you have gender equality. Now, gender equality is empowering all women and girls, which is very necessary. And it is very important to have a peaceful and prosperous and sustainable world. Again, it ends all forms of discrimination, violence, and it calls for the participation of women and equal opportunities. So it should start right from leadership to all levels, from the home to the political decision making. Every level, we have to see women empowerment, and we have to see that there is gender equality both at home and at the workplace. Then you have clean water and sanitation. This again, most of the time, efforts are made to some extent, but it is not really full up to the mark. So it has to be made right from the gully level, from the micro level to the macro level, where there is access to clean water and adequate sanitation measures are taken for a safe and healthy living again. So all these are somewhere correlated. Then you have affordable and clean use of energy. So here we are talking of also the renewable energy, which aims at supporting, clean and green technologies. So we can also, catalyze, you can include the public and private financing to encourage more of the clean energy. Then decent work and economic growth, which is achieved, through good economic productivity, through diversification and technological upgrading and innovation, which should focus on high value and labor intensive market, sectors, so that there is better economic growth. So each country might here in this case adapt to different measures to ensure that there is a good economic growth and a decent living working conditions for people. Then you have the industry, innovation and infrastructure. Then you have the reduced inequalities, sustainable cities and communities. Sustainable cities, of course, a lot of initiatives are being taken at city level also with respect to the infrastructure. We are talking of green infrastructure today. We are talking of using better, more sustainable materials for construction and so on. And then responsible consumption and production. So, it should start right at the production, initial production stage itself. And then it has to follow up even at the consumption stage, where there is, less wastage and you use only what is required. And there is after the use also you ensure the reuse and the recycling, so that we cover up or we are become more responsible towards the achieving this goal. Then we talk of climate action, of course, which we are talking here as one of the theme. Then life below water. life below water is also very important because, our oceans are also our planet's important part of a planet's life support, and they provide water, food, and so to regulate the life underwater is also very important as the next one, which is the life on land. So life on land, when we're talking of how to promote sustainable use of the ecosystem and the biodiversity. It is very, very important over here. Again, how we are talking in terms of the cleanup drives that we are incorporating at various levels, the avoid using of pesticides, chemicals, etc. Then you have peace, justice, and strong institutions. So we need to build up all these to promote non-discriminatory laws, policy, to combat corruption, bribery, and all these measures should be to prevent or to stop crime in some way. So unless this is done because peace is, as we have seen, peace is very important, because all other goals you cannot achieve if there is no peace. So peace was also given stressed upon, in addition to the other measures like the climate change and all. It was thought that this strong building up of strong institutions to achieve them is also very, very important. And then it is also talking of the partnerships. So here, when organizations or people come together with who have who share the same goal, it becomes more easier to achieve the goal. So partnerships between various organizations, the PPP model, the government, private and public bodies, they can all come forward, collaborate, mobilize resources, mobilize finance. You can have the universal trading system, remove the trade barriers and so on, and which can lead to a sustainable growth. So this was to do at the macro level. Then we are talking of, go to the next slide. Yeah, so how it all started. The next one. This is talking of the National Action Plan on Climate Change, where it is talking of various missions in this plan, which talks of National Water Mission, National Mission for Sustaining Ecosystem. Then it talks of the Solar Mission, and it talks of the Enhanced Energy Efficiency. And in this, it is talking of the National Mission on Sustainable Habitat. So habitat is relevant at the micro level, where we talk of how to maintain a sustainable habitat. Then it is also talking of sustainable agriculture practice, Green India Mission, and so on. So these are all the various, action plans which have started off at the city level and at the micro level. Yeah, next slide. Now, this is talking of the NMSH, which we had seen in the previous slide. It is one of the key factors. Here we are talking of how extension of energy conservation building code. Now today, any building, it is mandatory to get a clearance to have that it is ECBC certified, at least for a few sections of the building. It has still not been made as mandatory by law. So it is high time that we make it mandatory to adopt the building code, which is promoting green. It is today it is more like incentives are given and they are more promoted, though it is not made mandatory, but very soon it should be made mandatory to have the green energy building code implemented. Then we are talking of better urban planning and modal shift to public transportation. Now the success for any city is not measured by the number of car owners that you have. It is measured by if maximum people in the city travel by public transportation, only then it is said to be a smart city, and only then it is said to be a sustainable city. If your mass transit system has failed, that is, if maximum people do not use it and most of them end up using their vehicles, that means somewhere you have failed on the transport planning. The last mile connectivity is missing here. So we need to work on that, which is very, very important. Then we are talking of recycling of material and urban waste management. So here, this is also a very important part of our sustainable habitat. water resource management and drinking water supply in urban areas, wastewater management. As I was telling in the previous slide also, access to clean drinking water supply is equally important, and how we conserve our water resources. Today, we are building on the on the sea, we are reclaiming wetlands, and we are building, so all that is not required. It should be avoided. Then it is talking of the municipal solid waste management and the urban stormwater management. Urban stormwater management is a very big problem in all the urban areas. Hardly any thought is given to it uh, at the macro level and at the micro level also. Cities don't give thought to it. Even in even in your own city, if you see how many communities or how many group of dwellings you will have where the stormwater drain is actually addressed to. Hardly. I remember when our students go out for studying stormwater drains, they hardly have any examples to cite. All they end up is doing some desktop studies of it being applicable in some context in some other place which they have never seen. But you have only planned city like Chandigarh and a few more good examples where you can actually see the stormwater drains effectively managed, or in some places, even if it's provided, it is not functional. So the effective management of all this is required. So it is not just providing facilities, amenities, but also infrastructure, but also managing it, and how the practices by the people, which becomes very important. Next. Yeah, so here we are talking of the Smart Cities Mission, Swachh Bharat, which I'm sure everybody is aware of, then the urban transport program, and so on. Next. Yeah, some of the smart solutions, which are taken up by at the city level. In fact, 100 cities have been identified under the smart city concept. So they have taken up various measures with respect to like e-governance, citizen services, energy management, urban mobility, waste management, water management, and so on. So likewise. Next. Yeah, these are the list of the cities which are working towards smart cities. Next. Yeah, here this is an example of Infosys building, which is the phase 2 campus at next slide. Yeah, this is example of sustainable campus, which is Infosys Pune, which is a very good example of how the city. In fact, this campus is got the LEED certification, the second phase, and it has in two stages, wherein you had retrofit of the old buildings to make them workable, to make them more efficient. So it was seen at all levels, where right from the retrofitting the chiller plants to the air handling units, BMS retrofit, the UPS, everything from the lighting to everything, how the retrofitting was done. And in addition, the new campus, the new parts which were developed, the new buildings were also very efficiently designed. So they have met all the standards, and today they are LEED certified. This is a very good example. Today it is accommodating almost 34,000, more than 34,000 people. Nikita, I think you can just play one video I have sent you, which is talking of this Infosys campus at Pune.
Yes, ma'am. Just give me a minute.
Our retrofit costs are 21% lower than the standard costs that are there in the industry.
Rainwater harvesting is practiced throughout the campus, which features 42 recharge wells, 3 reservoirs, and a 65 million litre capacity. Efficient fixtures and dual flush toilets also contribute to conservation, as does an on-campus sewage treatment plant.
Design optimization for water gave us 45% savings in office buildings, 43% savings in food courts, and 33% savings in guest houses. We do very comprehensive smart metering process, which are connected back to our building management systems.
All waste is segregated at source. Organic waste is converted into fuel at a 2-ton biogas plant. Dried leaves are used to make vermicompost.
More than 90% of the waste have been diverted from landfills and have been reused in a responsible way.
Infosys believes in providing its employees a healthy and a comfortable work environment. Carbon dioxide sensors permeate the campus, and frequent indoor air quality audits are conducted to ensure that all systems are performing properly. For overall quality assurance, the performance of every building on the 113-acre complex is monitored and managed by one central command system.
There's also a very comprehensive advanced help desk where an employee can log in the system and raise a complaint if he has issues in comfort. LEED is a very thoughtfully designed framework of evaluating a building environment that is green, safe and sustainable. We realize that LEED gives us a holistic view of what is needed to be done to give the occupants an environment to deliver to their best potential.
As an environmentally and socially aware multinational, Infosys is committed to sustainability's triple bottom line: people, planet and profit. And LEED, the only globally recognized rating system for green building, is working with Infosys every step of the way.
Infosys strives to deliver value and innovation to build a sustainable future for ourselves, for our clients and for the society that we live in. So all our projects are designed keeping LEED Platinum as the ultimate goal.
To learn more, visit JBCI.
Ma'am, you want the other video also, or shall we go back to the
you go to the slide 20.
Okay, ma'am.
No, slide 20.
Slide number 20.
Nikita?
Yes, ma'am. 1 second. I had to go back to check.
Where I'm talking of that climate resilient farming.
Ah.
Yeah, this is one example, where we are talking of climate resilient farming, wherein, you can conserve using indigenous varieties of crops, which are not necessarily locally grown. So this was an example where in West Bengal, there was a place where this place was highly vulnerable to cyclones, and they had problems of, where the water wasn't very saline and other issues, which was somewhere affecting the local agriculture. So what they thought is, the community, a group of people, they volunteered, and they grew 62 different varieties of rice in the field, which is best grown in upland conditions surrounded by low saline water. So this was one measure adopted, wherein it also made organic compost and conducted rainwater. They also conducted various rainwater harvesting on the field. So this particular growing this particular crop did help them to some extent. Then you can go to the next slide. Yeah, here we are talking of the same thing. How conservation of this indigenous rice varieties helped them to tackle the salt tolerant, and also which was very critical to sustain the local agriculture. So this was one example, wherein because of this, they could revive interest amongst the community members who had otherwise given up this practice, and they could imbibe in them the traditional varieties, and which have been later on adopted for practice. Then next one. These are all initiatives, few examples, where efforts are being made at the local level, at school level, wherein you have this Delhi Public School, which is the efforts are made by the school children by planting native trees and increasing the local biodiversity to play a significant role in enhancing urban resilience. So as I told you, it has to start at all levels, right from school level to the every school or every university, every institution, and can have a small biodiversity setup in their own campus. So this also where you can invite the local flora and fauna. In fact, we were also thinking of on similar lines at our institution, which is still pending. So these, because we all know the role of trees and how they, combat in lowering the temperature. So all these measures were taken up. These are few examples, and also composting of wet waste, segregation of the waste, and use of biocompost in school gardens. So these were little initiatives which were taken up. Then you also had this next one, Gyan Mandir Public School which was also making similar efforts of managing the water resources and endpoint consumption. What they did is they have identified where the problem is. So they have not just they have worked out on a solution wherein you identify the problem and you work out right from the source till the end. So you can see in this diagram how right from this mapping of, they have done a mapping of the entire water cycle, which from where the water is used till the end consumption. So mapping of water resources in the campus, where they have worked on how the water is to be used, how wastewater can be avoided by the use of, repair of leakages, installing of float valves, imbibing drip irrigation. And there was a systematic approach to conserve water. Water quality tests were done. Then rooftop rainwater harvesting was done. So all these measures where they identified, right from the wastage till the end, this all helped in conserving water. Then there is one oregano community here in Hyderabad. It is a gated community where it is a very good example of how sustainable practices have been, inculcated, and which have been forced kind of, on the residents. And today, the entire community is self-sustainable. It does not have to depend on the outside for its day-to-day requirements. So, I'll show you one video which is talking of this a particular community. So at the community level, how through sustainable practices, you can work out and have a better quality of life. This is a good example. Today, it is on the city, outskirts of the city. You can play the video of that, Nikita. It is the oregano. Yeah, Nikita, just play the video.
Just 1 minute, ma'am.
Urbanization is a global phenomenon, and more so in a developing country like India. Cities have grown up substantially. For example, the population in Hyderabad has nearly doubled in the last 15 years or so. So this creates substantial impact on the city resources, on the city infrastructure, and it's going to have a major impact on the environment. So there is a need to break this linkage between the growth of buildings and the increase in resource consumption.
I looked at my own lifestyle, like why are we running after this rat race? Like how do you look at happiness versus GDP? If we are all going towards GDP, somewhere there is a flaw. As an architect, can we reduce the demand itself, minimize the demand of human living, and yet make it very aspirational? Organo Nandi is fundamentally an intention of creating an eco-habitat. It's not just development, it's about building a community and the whole ecosystem around it. First thing that we actually said is that our company is going to do only triple bottom line business. People, planet, and then profits.
I've always been a city boy, never knew the nuances of a village. But when I visited Nandi for the first time, I saw the passion in the developers, and they transformed a barren land to an eco-habitat and a community where the life is buzzing, and that's when I decided to be a part of Nandi.
There are 7 strands of sustainability in which we will try to measure. One is earth. How are we contributing to earth? Similarly, energy that our project is going to consume, and then water, air, people, shelter, and then food. In Organo Nandi, we have a goal to produce our own food in front of our eyes. We have 6 acres plus land for vegetables and fruits. And apart from this, we also have dairy. We produce our own milk. That is all shared by everybody. Like everybody is partner in that.
We were thinking about the sustainability, natural farming, and all of that stuff. And when we moved here, I met a lot of people who were thinking the same things.
75% of the staff, those who work here, are from the local villages. And they became multi-skilled also. Now electrician can also repair irrigation system.
నా పేరు మమత, మా ఊరి పేరు బాకారం. నేను ఇలా ఆర్గానిక్లో పనిచేయడానికి రావడం 2 సంవత్సరాల నుంచి చేస్తున్నాను. ఆర్గానిక్లో పనిచేయడం వలన బాగానే ఉంది. ఆర్గానిక్ ప్రకృతి అనడానికి బాగానే ఉంది. బయట దానికన్నా ఇక్కడ ஆர்கானிக்ல பஞ்சேயడం వలన మనం సొంతంగా పండించినట్టుగానే బాగా ఉంది.
இன்னொன்று என்னென்னா அவங்க இங்கேருந்து இந்த பக்கத்தில் இருக்கிற ஃபார்மர்ஸ் எல்லாம் இங்கேருந்து ஆர்கானிக் மெத்தடில் எப்படி பண்ணுறோம் அதை அவங்க இம்ப்ளிமெண்ட் பண்ண முடியுமா, இங்கிட்ட இருந்து கற்றுக்கிட்டு போய் அங்கே பண்ணுறாங்க. அது ஒன்று எனக்கு ரொம்ப பாசிட்டிவாக பக்கத்தில் இருக்கிற நெய்பர்ஸ் இதெல்லாம் கம்யூனிட்டி.
As a resident, I feel good that not only am I getting the benefit of Nandi, but at the same time, the community is taking care of the larger village community around us.
మేము ఇక్కడ పని చేయడం వల్ల మా ఆయన నేను మా పిల్లలు సంతోషంగానే ఉన్నాం. ఇక్కడ మాకు ఆర్గానిక్లో అప్పుడు అది స్కూల్ ఫీజు కట్టాలన్నా దానికి దీనికనే ఇబ్బంది అవుతుంది. ఇప్పుడు ఏమి ఇబ్బంది లేకుండా మంచిగా సంతోషంగా బాగా ఉన్నాం.
I think we as a community are healthier and happier. Everybody knows everybody and there are very healthy relationships.
இதுக்கு முன்னாடி அப்பார்ட்மெண்ட்டில் இருக்கும்போது என்னென்னா பசங்க வீட்டுக்குள்ளே விளையாடுறது, இப்போ இங்கே வந்ததுக்கப்புறம் இது பெரிய எக்ஸ்டெண்டட் ஃபேமிலி மாதிரி ஆயிடுச்சு. எல்லோரும் எப்போவும் ஃபுல்லாக எல்லோரும் வீட்டுக்கு போய் ஃபுல்லாக விளையாடுறது ஃபுல்லாக.
They made it very clear that environmental sustainability and good living can go together. And in addition to that, they also brought in a concept of social inclusivity.
I absolutely love Nandi. What more can I say? I would never go back to living, the way we were living before. I mean, this is my heaven.
In its own small way, what Nandi has done here is good for the planet, and being part of that community makes me very happy.
Nandi is a shining example of a building project in the entire country. It gives you a lot of hope for the future.
Now I consider myself proudly Nandian. This is how the future should be.
This is a very good example of how an entire ecosystem is built. So even though this community, this society, it is located on the outskirts of the city, but people don't mind commuting because the quality of life that it offers. And of course, as you had seen the residents, they were talking that it is a much more happier place, a healthier place. So end of the day, if you get a place which is healthy to live, which makes you happy, I think that compensates. And if you don't mind traveling long distance to come to the city for place of work. So all said and done, this is a good example. So I would end the talk with what Ernest Hemingway had said, that the earth is a fine place and worth fighting for. So it all depends on how we take care of this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamini ma'am, for not just talking about the macro level, but also how to solve it at our home level and workplace level with case studies and examples. Thank you so much for that. Now, I would like to invite Raj Reddy sir to give his presentation. Sir?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good. So can I start, Nikita?
Yes, sir, please go ahead.
Okay, I'm using a mobile phone, so please excuse me.
Okay.
Yeah, good evening. Now we are in a confluence age whereby we are in a dilemma of performing or perish. Performing in the sense to restore our ecosystems and to stop the climate change. The climate change is having a great effects on human and other habitats. So habitat is a place where every animal has a place to live, and wherein it finds the food, water, shelter it needs to live in. So the humans are one of the animal, they feel they are the cleverest animal, and which is the most dangerous animal on the earth, which is destroying the ecosystem. So basically the habitats are two types. One is the terrestrial, that is land habitats, and the aquatic, that is water habitats. The total earth system, the global ecosystem is divided into two. So grasslands, forests, deserts, tundra, and mountains are all the land habitats, and other is the fresh water, salt water, that is aquatic. So the oceans, the rivers, the lakes and seas, all are the aquatic. So now these are the habitats. The habitat where we are just talking about the expressibility. The human is expressing that he is feeling heat waves, he is going through the drought, and he is going through the floods, and he is going through the cyclones, and he is going through strong winds. is going through the cloud. But at the same time, the nature, the other animals and other living beings are all going through the same the climate change. So as we already destroyed the mountains, we destroyed the forests, we destroyed the savanna, we destroyed the polars, we destroyed the the oceans, we destroyed the deserts, and every habitat we destroyed. We interfered in the safe and happy living of the animals. Now, in the process of adopting or adopting or stopping a climate change, now we are looking to build a resilient infrastructure. So how can we do that? What is the what really challenges in front of us? So we are talking about urban areas, we are talking about coastal areas, we are talking about the mountains, we are talking about forest areas, we were talking about flood zone areas, low-lying areas, we are talking about the cold places where the people lives, North America and other places. So the challenge is around 71 to 76% of CO2 emissions are from the global final energy use and represent high concentration of financial infrastructure and human assets and activities that are most vulnerable. So due to the climate impacts. So in coming decades, the hundreds of millions of people in urban areas likely to be affected by rising sea levels. We already seen rising sea levels. So not only just coastal people, due to there are 10 million people are already under the threat, and 90% of the urban areas, if we see, they're all coastal areas. So people, as historian says, our the water is the life, and so the cities are established across the coastal areas. So and in addition to that, the infrastructure and the basic services required for a quality of life in cities also creating climate change, and which is affecting. And in addition to that, economic and social infrastructure and other facilities are located in offices for functioning of the governance and all, and they also affecting. So most affected populations are the urban poor populations, because the richest will live in a good accommodated places where he can use heaters if it is cold, when he can use air conditioning when it is hot. So, but the slum dwellers, the developing nations are mostly affected. So who really tend to live along the river banks, hillside slopes, and those can be, they can prone to landslides. And the people lives near the nalas and other affected areas, they can, they are polluted grounds and all. So those are very vulnerable people, and those who lives around the slopes and all, they are vulnerable to earthquakes. So the waterfronts and coastal areas also more prone to flooding, because the fishery community, most of them lives along the coastal zone. So they are all called urban poor. So these are very vulnerable, and there are more than 1 billion people lives in those settlements across the globe. So that is most important. And despite of these risks, many cities have not yet addressed climate change, because we are talking about climate change since 20 years, but there is no reasonable address has been done by nations, the parties of the COP20, whatever the COP. So the reasons include the lack of relevant city policies, action plans, or there is no existence of regulations. Or if there is a regulations or urban planning and nobody is following, and environment is being taken into granted without being put any efforts to change their style of functioning, which has not been adjusted to manage the climate change. They are functioning in a way it is destroying, and nobody is changing their lifestyle to manage the climate change. So, and most of them are slowly responding. If you see the Paris agreement, when the president of USA himself walked away from the meeting. So that means there is sometimes there is no response, and some countries they have low response. So due to some, the developed countries and all, there is no reason why they are giving away. But vulnerable countries, lack of capacity and lack of resources, we may have some consideration towards them, but some of them are lack of public awareness, and climate variability and climate change. It induced a hazard mitigation. So hazards are there, but there is no mitigation actions taking place. So that is the most important challenge which we have at this juncture. So the nations are building. They are instead of green, they are going for gray, hard man-made infrastructure, and it needs to be repaired. So making our infrastructure resilient is ever more important as climate change intensifies extreme weathers, and it should be able to communicate with the nature, and it should accommodate the ecosystems, and whereby we can withstand, to learn from the past impact of the climate change, and then adapt to tune to the climate change. So we need to rebuild and improve the existing infrastructure to and resilient infrastructure which should adapt the climate change, and also stop the climate change is possible by using the nature-based solutions. So, and so most of the people are now looking towards the nature-based solutions in the resilient infrastructure. So how to what are the nature-based solutions? So in the coastal storms, the sea level rise and the erosion happens. So how to stop that, and how to stop the extreme heat, how to stop the flooding, how to stop the winds, and how to stop the cold. These are the most important. You may not stop, but how to protect yourself by building a resilient infrastructure. So the infrastructure are often thought of man-made structures and buildings, but it can also include natural systems such as wetlands. Wetlands are most important systems that emulate the nature, such as green roofs. So now the policy makers should improve on the national infrastructure, and the international community should come forward and fund for the nature-based solution. So the critical, it is critical. We are all in the critical juncture whereby there must be the infrastructure funding for the nature-based solutions, because most of the people will not come forward for nature-based solutions, and no funder will come forward because it is to be revived, and it cannot be permanent. So you have to change as the system changes, as the nature changes, as the climate changes. So that is why so most of the times it is affecting. But now the governments are coming forward to to start working on the nature-based solutions. For example, America They took a legislation is called Living Shoreline Act 2019, and also the American Transportation Act 2019 and Climate Stewardship Act. So these are all the examples. America is coming up, and other countries also coming up to establish EIS, Environment Protection Act, and other things are getting forward. And the National Building Codes the country is developing, they are incorporating the resilient green building solutions as well as the nature-based solutions, but they are not to the required tune. They are not to the to cater the climate change. So the people always think about the cost when we are talking about the nature-based solutions. So you need to employ nature-based solutions to create sustainable climate resilient solutions to the needs of the country, needs of the people, and then needs of the future generations. That is most important. And these nature-based solutions should be higher quality, they're low cost and more resilient and more beneficial to the society, and for maintaining as well, repairing and replacing a grain, because the old infrastructure which we call about gray infrastructure, it is not resilient, and we have to replace with the green infrastructure. It also costs. So your cost not only to the new infrastructure, it will also add the removal of the gray infrastructure a cost out to us. So therefore the nature-based solutions can actually help the world, help the universe, help the Mother Earth to effective way substantially the control the climate change, and socially, economically, and environmentally it will give co-benefits. And combining so sometimes what happened, you may not able to remove the gray, but you can also add nature-based solutions to gray infrastructure which you already have, which is called retrofitting. By retrofitting the green into your modeling and all can actually remodeling the infrastructure of the nations. So this is most important. So how to fix is important. So how can we achieve those targets which are set by the the parties? COP is important. So restoring is one. Then the project should now starting thinking about the green energy and green infrastructure, natural infrastructure. That is important. And also nature-based solutions for coastal storms and sea level rise and erosion is also important. So the coastal communities are experiencing effect of climate change, drastic climate change, so including sea level rise, more intense storms, flooding, erosion. So this is costing a lot to the nations. So it is to be the
Hello, sir. Raj Reddy, sir. We can't hear you. Ma'am, we're just trying to connect to Raj Reddy, sir. Few minutes.
Yeah. I think connection is lost or something, maybe.
Yes, ma'am.
Nikita, we have another speaker, no, apart from Madam and Raj
No,
Reddy sir?
no, sir. Raj Reddy, sir is joining back. now.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you now.
Am I? Okay. Excellent. So the nature-based solutions about the infrastructure. So the coast which we are talking about, the tides, they used to be low tides. Now, due to sea level rise and all, high tides are becoming higher and higher. Usually occasionally and now frequently happening. If you see the extreme the hurricane happening in 17, 18, and
Huh. Yes, sir. Sir, ఇప్పుడు చెప్పండి sir.
is it voice clear?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Right. So climate change impacts require a re-evolution of infrastructure solutions because for many reasons, coastal areas, are very vulnerable. So they need natural infrastructure solutions, which must be resilient. So the wetlands, mangroves, marshes, coastal reefs, and other installations of living shorelines are most important. So normally, when you see a 15-feet marsh can absorb up to 50% of the incoming wave energy, and 330 feet of mangrove trees can reduce a wave height of 66%. So, but by if you just build a grey infrastructure, it only redirects. It will never absorb the it will never dissipate. So either wave energy. So the waves can overtap jetties and bulkheads and levees, and then it can flood. The water can come into cities. So the marshes also collect the sand sediments from the water and can grow in elevation. So it can grow in elevation to as the sea level rises. But when you build an infrastructure a grey infrastructure, a concrete infrastructure, it will not adapt to the original water levels. It can just stay as it is. So either you need to repair it or you need to raise it. But marshes really go as the tide comes up, as the sand goes. So that is one resilient infrastructure required. And then the nature-based solutions for inland flooding. Basically, when the rivers, they need, when the rainfall happens, you need to have a landscaping needs to be developed according to the sense of the flooding and according to the what we call the slope and the geometry of the land. So that's how the floods will be controlled. Otherwise, what happened, in the name of development, we are destroying the natural drainage systems, the natural storm systems and all. So those are all most affecting. So then the architects and the planners should looking into the adopting the natural streams as their stormwater drain. So stormwater drainage system in many cities, it is never been a green system. So if you go for a green system, if you have the pavers which can absorb water, the eco-friendly pavers are what we call, when a precipitation happens, it should allow water to sink in. So that is called a green infrastructure. Green infrastructure in the form of pavements also. Pavement should be absorb water, and then there must be a system whereby the rainwater should go percolate into the ground, which should increase the groundwater table can be used. So, and green infrastructure solutions, something like the green roofs. Green roofs sometimes can absorb water and release slowly. And sometimes what happens, we should also have that the stormwater control barriers, whereby you will have cells in the ground, and then water will be stored when rain, because the rain comes, it rains across the city. So the heavy water, the concrete jungle, the water comes from the roofs, water from the roads all come onto the road and then flood it. The drainage system which is designed is not enough for sudden storms. So in that cases, what happen, you need to have that green roofs can control. Sometime the water can hold and then it will release maybe after half an hour or after 1 hour. And then groundwater percolation tanks can also stock the water for 1-2 days, and then it will release the water after 2-3 days. So those systems are most important. And at the same time, not only green roofs, the rain gardens should be developed, and bioswales, long deep channels whereby you plant grasses along the roads, so along the parkings, which can absorb the carbon as well as water. So that is important. Then urban tree canopies are most important, because the more green the motor, it can absorb the runoff waters, so it can stop the water evaporation as well. It can, and then the weather can be cold. So carbon can also be captured, as well as water can also be stopped for stopping the flooding. This is carbon flooding. So, and permeable pavements is most important. As I told you, 50% of the water can be accommodated, into the ground by using the filters through the pavements, and it is not expensive. If you compare with the concrete and other things, it is 50% less expensive. But the planners should think about it, and then they must concentrate on it. And natural infrastructure solutions for flood, which includes something like wetland marshes, protecting them by precipitation, observing to reduce the runoffs. So at least 1 acre of wetlands can store up to 330,000 gallons of water. So that means you can really stop the flooding. The wetlands can also be used for the STP. Instead of STP, you can also use wetlands for cleaning the the soil water. So that is also nowadays into practice under the green infrastructure. Then protecting, restoring the riparian, buffers. So vegetable forest, buffers along the rivers and streams, they can also reduce the amount of water entering into the waterways. Slowly, it will absorb some, and then water can go through the roots and then enter the natural system instead of directly flooding into the water body. So that will also 90% of the water can be absorbed into the ground, and then 10% only go into the water body. So that is most important. And if we develop this, there are so much of co-benefits to chemical fertilizers can be if you really going for chemical fertilizers, and what happens, the water can also affect the public health. So you need to stop and go for what we call the organic compost and other things. So the water always will become less polluted, and then that less polluted water will accommodate, it will become habitat for the green aquas, the aquatic life and aquatic culture. So viscons in the conservation, every area should have a conservation fund whereby you can use for the ecosystem development. So instead of you having the community, what we call the corpus fund, parallelly you should have a conservation fund. That conservation fund should be used to protect the areas of the water bodies, protect the flooding and other things. So then how to control your extreme heat, because the heat waves are now, even in the winter we can feel in the daytime very, very hot, and then in the night time we are feeling very cold. So heat waves are hitting even in the winter. So how to control that? So the gray infrastructure really create these heat waves because it absorbs the heat directly and then release in the night. So nights also we are feeling very hot. Then in the winter also we are using the air conditioning. So gray infrastructure, particularly road areas, parking areas, buildings, and the rooftops and all can be start doing a vegetarian cover. So it can absorb the heat, and then it can also give the coolness to the residents. So clean roofs are most important. It is 30 to 40 Fahrenheit cooler than the normal gray home. So it will reduce 75% of the heat, and then you don't need any air conditions in the night. So then tree cover. So when you come shadow with the trees, then what happens? Your temperature will come down at least to 3 Fahrenheit. So that will reduce really what we call many even shops also, even the commercial areas, you are also using the air conditioning in the daytime. So if your area is cooler with a tree cover, that can really bring down the temperature, whereby your energy will be saved. So then garden. So in the parking lots and the streets and yards, and you can have a native plant. So instead of you bringing a plant from different area, if you really plant, if it is the plants belong to that area, it has ecosystem for that. Those things to be looked into, because the people are in the name of landscaping and all, they are bringing non-native trees, non-native garden. So those gardens will not go with the nature. So vertical gardens can also be encouraged. In the olden days, even thatched houses, the people used to grow vertical gardens as a creepers. They are vegetable growers. You can also use them, and then you can also live with them. So planting on the walls. those will also give your vegetables and also give a shape to the building, and building the life, the building will breathe through, and building also can be cool. Cool building will always give coolness in the house. So so there are solutions. There are many solutions which can be used to build the environment, to natural environment, and which is very resilient to the the climate change. So natural environments and green vegetation provide more shade, moisture, and it will also keep the moisture, and then evaporation, moisture and evaporation, then the building environment will be livable, so the people feel to instead of a house, you can feel that is as a home. So it reduces temperature. At the same time, the systems it sequestrates carbon, and it helps minimizing the future warming. So the cyclic effects of good will come into picture. So then, so what are the how to do that? Building resilient heat waves. So by 2050, 1.6 billion people live more than 970 cities will be regularly exposed to extreme high temperature. So a study says that. So urban heat island effects already started giving, and it will still affects more. So but nature provides powerful solutions. How to use them? Communities they should create urban forests and green space to reduce the heat waves in cities, as as the trees and other plants cool the surroundings and environment by offering shade and releasing water through their leaves, because that will cool down. So structural design should also involve and incorporated the natural solutions. So the designer should also think in those ways, and the resilience to drought is also important, because the droughts will not happen all of a sudden. Droughts with the sequence of the actions which man made, and the climate change affecting the rainfall pattern across the world. So it is changing now. Instead of raining in June 8th till August, now the rains are coming in October and November. So the rain pattern is changing, and heat also changing. So that is creating, because the water system will should adapt to the food, the food growing process. If water system changes, the rainfall pattern changes, then it affects on the food growing. So if the food if it is not, what will happen? You will have a shortage of food. The shortage of food leads to drought. So though you have water, and then you will be in the drought. The drought not necessarily just a water. Drought can also be even if you have water also, you can be in drought. So the flood can also give out to a drought situation. Heavy rains also bring a drought. So it not just less rains, but what we call a change of pattern also will create a drought. So we must create a sponge cities whereby the water will be absorbed into the ground, and the waters can be used whenever we require. That is most important. Then how to build a resilience to coastal systems? By 2025, 410 million people in coastal communities could risk in the coastal flooding. So that is most dangerous situation is expected. So we need to work on the corals and the protection of the coastals. Then how to build resilience to cyclones and strong winds. So if you see the Jaipur, pink city, and you have some buildings whereby the wind will go through the building windows, and it creates a natural cooler. So that's how you should build your homes, to control or to resist the climate change and strong winds. So the winds can be stopped or by building, the shape of the building should be too adaptable, and then the tree cover and other things can also, aerodynamic shape of the building should be built so that it will not affect on the building, so that is important. And roof design should be made in such a way that instead of creating problems, it should create a resilience to the habitants. So multiple slopes and multiple shapes and central shaft to remove the chimney effects can also be used. In old, if you see the old houses in India are examples, of those kind of houses which will not affect the climate, cyclones and strong winds and all. So those should be looked into again to see how best we can fragile the earth structure, and planning for damage-free approach. That is most important. And how to control the extreme heat, that is important. So what are the resilient infrastructure for our nature-based solutions for extreme heat? So that is also important. So when heat waves comes in, so it will really create problems, the temperature and all. So as we already discussed, so you need to have a green cover and other things and all. So what are the actions required? So, and the resilience is not just one person or governmental thing. It is to be adopted through identifying the groups of society, particularly who are the vulnerable social, cultural, economic, and environmental circumstances. And you have to see the women, you have to see the elderly people, you have to see people with disabilities and indigenous people, and different religious minorities and other marginal population should be considered. And then you should make groups, and then you should adopt. The government should have a policy to incorporate all the people, and then you should have an analysis on that, and then identify underlying factors of their vulnerability, and then build a mechanism to for the stakeholders to participation into the local governance. It is not just a government participation or forcible, but it should be a inclusive government, and you must have a mechanism to invite them to participate in the formal discussions, consultation, processing, policy making, multi-stakeholder advisory committees, organized forums like that. If I say in UK, I used to be the governor of one school, and then the community himself involved in the development of the school. So same way, every government should have that multi-stakeholder advisory committees whereby their problems will be heard. Then engage with them. You must engage with not only the government, but non-state actors like CSOs, climate, associated some what we call policy experts, think tank. You must empower, and then you must empower the local governments, and then you must facilitate a collaboration across the governance, local, regional, and the national. So there must be a dialogue between all these three to incorporate the required for the climate resilience. And then you must identify the good practice by local actors. So where is success stories? You must bring the success stories, and then develop one, and then multiply it, and then adopt across the nation or nations. And then the existing local government arrangements and link with the climate resilience, and then policy process to local economic development. So what is required? It cannot be same formula cannot be applied to whole. So you have to change across, depending upon the local requirement. Then you need to build where relevant government initiatives and decentralization, and promote the local action on climate risk. Because if you give the ownership to the local by guiding from above or funding, or whenever required, you put some the what we call amount in, or finance in, and then they can develop to their needs. So you have to give them the ownership and then awareness. So develop a governance mechanism for adopting decision making, not just the giving out advices, but decision making also. If you use the local governance mechanism, establish a governance arrangement for support to adaptive decision making for climate resilience in the context of uncertainty presented by. So there are uncertainties. You cannot use the same formula, and that formula can be changed. So you need to adapt to the uncertainties. So and apply methodological tools to support the adaptive decision if you take a decision. And what are the methodological? So can it be horizontal? Can it be vertical? Or is it a robust decision? So a dynamic adaptive policy must be implemented. So there must be a continuous support, and there must be a learning mechanism evolving the climate, because risks are will come more and more. So you have to adapt to the risks. So that is important, because it cannot be a static, it is a dynamic risk policy. So there must be a high level political support for this sectional people, sectorial people, policy coordination while keeping. So when you are, because involving different stakeholders, so you need to have that coordination and transparent policy which should be implemented. So you must use the sector ministries, agencies, all national level climate policies into local development plans, and then different policy agendas. So and vice versa, the top down approach and the bottoms up approach should be implemented. So how to enforce them and then put them into regulatory measures in the future, and then that can also holds accountable, because you cannot just leave it out, but you should have that regulatory measures which can measure it, and there must be policy cycle. You need to integrate the climate risk with the opportunities available as a policy cycle. So the country should have sustainable development agenda, and you must have a mid-term, and then long-term and short-term. All these goals should be defined, and then you must have national, local, sectorial development plans developed according to that. So, the main impact, the main, the people participation, then the government or development cooperation, and also promotion of these all activities, and it will, it can vary from place to place, region to region, country to country. So it is most important. So a cooperative system can also do, and then giving out and measure them, and then give incentives if the one performs well, and then we can take that example and then take it to the next level. So that is most important. And anyhow, so the principle of resilience at the end, I just wanted to say the principle of resilience is it should not harm, do no harm, and then it should be climate proof, and it should enhance systematic climate resilience. And these are all the pro-poor principles. So if you really keep in mind only the richest and our corporates, it will not help. So you must take the poorest of the poor into account. So the measurable value of the poor and vulnerable is most important, and the transformation is also important. That is, and then enabling the policy framework is important, and then you must make accessible. The people should approach, and then it should be accessible, policy, whatever, and it's affordable. If you put very expense in the front, and it cannot work out. And then participation is also important, and then transparency. Every action you do, it should be transparent. So finally, whatever you do, and it should develop a methodology whereby quantifying physical climate risk, incorporating these risks into economic and financial assessment, and and incentivize when things goes right is most important. But the why we need to do this, because the civil unrest will happen, and then the yields production will come down, and psychological problems will come in, physiological problems will come in, land patterns will change, the water resources will change, the pests will come in, new pests will come, and then it can eat away. The levels rise will also create problems, other things. So even if the water loses, what happened? The temperature rise, or so many things will happen. So this increase in the what we call climate change will really project a climatic scenarios whereby your growth will stop. So it will intensify the hazards and extreme heavy rainfalls, droughts, and high sea level. So all this will come in what we call they will become new normal. So instead of doing that, so the measures which I already discussed should what we call bring down the to the normalcy. So at the end, any solution which gives a built environment to natural environment, any solutions which give the comfort to the people, any solutions which really give a peaceful life of all the ecosystems, which what we call Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. That is what the Indian slogan is. Loka Samasta means not just human beings; it's all ecosystem should survive in what we call in biodiversifying way. That is the ultimate of the resilient infrastructure. And thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. You very nicely went into detail on how to gain resilience over different extreme weathers, and also for all types of populations and geographical locations based on their vulnerabilities. And you also mentioned how decision-making and implementation process should always be multi-stakeholder approach. So thank you for sharing all this, sir. I think we don't have any questions from the audience. So we have reached a great conclusion for this webinar. Thank you so much for being present here, both Kamini ma'am and